Why would the county of Los Angeles pay $7.2 million to settle a lawsuit filed by the family of a slain firefighter? I have a lot to say about this case. I'm Karen Michael, and you're listening to The Job Judge. Welcome to The Job Judge, the podcast for anyone who works, with a special emphasis to our HR professionals and managers. I'm Karen Michael, your host of The Job Judge, where together we talk about all those legal landmines and workplace dysfunction that's probably happening in your organization. And together, the goal of The Job Judge is really to make workplaces work for you and for everybody. Now, I am an employment lawyer of 31 years. I'm a former HR executive. I have a lot of information I want to share, but I cannot give legal advice on this podcast. It really is just general guidance. And we do talk about sensitive subjects here on The Job Judge, especially today when we're talking about the murder of an employee. So please know that this is adult content. And finally, you're not going to want to miss an episode of The Job Judge. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to follow along, like, share, comment, so that everyone and other people can see this really important information. So let's talk about this case involving this firefighter. And this case is important to me because one of the things I see in workplaces too often is wimpy leadership. People who refuse to take a stance, refuse or unwilling to or unable or don't have the skills to be able to evaluate objectively a situation and make a firm decision. Because as I say all the time, accountability is the antidote to chaos. Without accountability in your workplace, you have chaos, and we need to hold people accountable. And you know that phrase that people talk about, there's three sides to every story, one side, their side, and somewhere in the middle is usually where the truth is. And I understand that that's a phrase used, and maybe sometimes that's the case. But you know what also sometimes is the case? Sometimes there's one side. Sometimes there's one person who's engaging in the problems, and we don't need a mediation, and we don't need both sides to work together. Sometimes what we need is for the person, the perpetrator, the person engaging in the bad behavior to be held accountable. And when you listen to the facts of this case and you hear the failures on the part of management and leadership in this organization, I hope you learn a lesson that you're not going to let this happen in your organization. Whether it's something horrible outcome like happened here, or just any kind of toxicity that creates a hostile environment for your employees. No one should have to tolerate that. Everybody that goes to work deserves a safe, civil, and legally compliant workplace. Now, the facts of this case I'm getting from an article written by the Los Angeles Times on June 15th, 2023. And it's relevant to 2024 because the LA County just announced the settlement of $7.2 million to the family of this firefighter. The title of the article is Workplace Harassment, Gunshots, Arson. What happened at Fire Station 81? And this is how the article goes. The firefighter lay bleeding at the remote station in Agua Dulce. He'd been shot several times, once through the neck. Tori Carlon moaned in pain. His assailant, a fellow firefighter at Fire Station 81, kept a semi-automatic handgun trained on the 44-year-old sprawled in the engine bay. Jonathan Tattoni, the perpetrator, as he was shooting, Mr. Carlon said, "Payback's a bitch, mother." Carlon had feared this day would come. Over the past 2 years, he'd been the target of Tattoni's anger. Okay, let's stop there. 2 years? For 2 years, this organization has tolerated this kind of behavior towards this man? He clearly told the organization what was going on multiple times. And wait till you hear the measures he took to try and protect himself from this man. And nothing was done. Nothing was done to protect this man and, frankly, other employees. Constantly on edge, Carlon refused to drink coffee from the communal pot after a shift change, preferring to make a new one. He clearly thought he was going to be poisoned by this unhinged coworker. He kept his food in a separate refrigerator in the barn, worried it would be tampered with. He warned his wife when Tony was off work, fearing he might come by the house and do her harm. Carlon had voiced his concerns to the Los Angeles County Fire Department captains and chiefs. His wife, Heidi, said, but nobody did anything. On April 29, 2021, he texted his wife about Tony. He said, quote, "It's obvious he will not stop harassing me until he hurts me or my family." That day came about a month later, on June 1st, when Tony, 45, opened fire at Station 81 off Sierra Highway in what became known as the Sierra Incident. Carlon wasn't the only victim. An LA County Sheriff's Department investigative report reviewed by the Times, according to this article, raises questions about how the county fire department and the county itself handled the workplace dispute and whether the shooting could have been prevented. Well, just for fun, I'll be the judge of that. I'm telling you, this shooting could have been prevented. Full stop. Had they addressed this way earlier, I will tell you this shooting could have been prevented, because people escalate. They start with something and then it builds and builds and builds, and somebody gets angrier and angrier and more hostile. They become more invested in the dispute, and then bad things can happen. This is why early intervention is so key. This is why I tell employers, if there is a whiff of a threat, violence, aggressive behavior, that person needs to go. We cannot tolerate this kind of behavior in our workplaces. Nobody should have to go to work and put up with this. Everyone deserves a safe, civil, and legally compliant workplace, physically safe and psychologically safe. It's really just that simple. And without accountability, we don't have that. The report, which includes interviews with Station 81 fire crew, exposes failures that led up to that bloody June day. Fire captains who brushed off Carlin's reports of feeling threatened, a battalion chief who forced Carlin and Tony to have more contact, because, there's their side and there's somewhere in the middle, more contact rather than transferring both of them out of the station, a complaint to the county that seemingly went unresolved. Now, I want to talk about this theory of transferring anybody. The man, Tony, shouldn't have been transferred. He should have been fired. The answer to an employee problem is not a transfer. It's a termination. This stuff is not that complicated. This is what accountability looks like. You're going to transfer him to somewhere else where his unhinged anger can be put upon other people? This guy is obviously unhinged. He's obviously got serious anger management issues. And nothing short of getting him out of there is going to fix this problem. This is the quote from his wife, from Mr. Carlin's wife. "Nobody did anything, from captain to chief, and it wasn't a secret. Everybody knew," she said. Everybody knew about the quote unquote dysfunction at Station 81. Tony was a ticking time bomb, and we knew it. And this guy, Carlon, no murder should happen, obviously, but this guy seems like such a great guy. And these people prey on people like that. Tony preyed on him because he is such a nice guy, because he's so calm in his demeanor. It was an easy target. By the time Carlon landed at Station 81, he'd been with the department for more than a decade. He deserved better, being there more than a decade. He began dating Heidi as he was coming off his probationary period, charming her with his kindness and lack of ego. She watched his career progress. The man who had been unable to watch her get an epidural when she was in labor with their first child decided to become a paramedic, ultimately promoting up in the fire department. Carlon worked 24-hour shifts from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The crew worked on brush inspections and responded to traffic accidents, etc. Fellow firefighters knew him, Carlon, as calm and easygoing family man. He got along with others and focused on doing his job and getting home with his wife and his 3 daughters. When he was with his family, he painted his daughter's nails and coached their softball teams. I mean, this breaks my heart. It makes me even more angry that this organization couldn't have enough courage to take some action. The problems began, Heidi said, after Tony started at the station. Tony, also an engineer, was Carlon's opposite. He had a quick temper. Once, he kicked in a door at the fire station because he was angry he couldn't find the key. Stop there. Why isn't he fired for that? Why isn't he fired for kicking down a door because he's so angry that he can't find a key? Oh, I'm shocked that this man led to some violence. Is anybody shocked that this man would escalate to violence? He's already violent. To his mom, I mean, I'm sorry that your son is so unhinged. Maybe you should have gotten him help earlier, but she's the enabler. She's enabling him to be this kind of aggressive person. To his mom, Tony was by the book and a straight arrow kind of guy. To his fellow firefighters at Station 81, he had an aggressive alpha male demeanor and came across as a bully. Carlon and Tony worked different shifts, but when one relieved the other, they weren't even on the same shift. They were expected to provide a shift pass down detailing what their workday had entailed. Tony complained to his mom that Carlon didn't finish his work that needed to get done on the engines, leaving Tony to have to complete the job. So I guess I'll just go down there and murder him. In 2019, Carlon began documenting increasingly tense interactions with Tony in his department calendar and notebook. Once, he wrote, Tony ignored him and later explained he was upset that Carlon and a captain had moved a television mount and hadn't patched the holes. Carlon told Tony he didn't have the spackle and planned to finish the task on its next shift. And Carlon said that Tony told him they should have gone to the store. I mean, this guy's unhinged about everything. He's angry about some flashlight, the weeds, the television mount, you name it, this guy's unhinged about it. And it's interesting because in this article, it shows his handwritten notes that he took in documenting these instances. This person says, they quote him, he wrote, last few times he's been so hostile, so now I go through the station captains. He said, Chief said, trying to prevent the ringing of the bell. Then it goes way up, said, just keep doing your job. In other words, prevent the ringing of the bell, prevent complaining too much, because then it goes up the chain of command. Tony got upset over a flashlight that went missing and the fact that Carlon hadn't looked for it in the nearby barn. Another time he was angry about weeds in the front of the station. That summer, Carlon wrote that Tony told him he didn't like or respect him and that things aren't going to work between us. He said that Tony told him the next step would be fist flying. Why? Why is this person still working there? One time he said, Arnie said he asks John if he's going to Twin Towers and fly into Tori's bedroom. Arnie says John said it was not a bad idea, that he was going to go fly. He was getting his pilot's license, apparently. This is what he wrote in his notes. I said my own captains won't even do anything. Arnie warns me of reporting anything. Said John's smart. There's nothing in the book said he has to like me. Arnie said he won't do anything stupid. I said he already did with saying next step is fist flying. Arnie apparently was the chief or the captain. This is exactly what I'm talking about. His captains won't do anything. John's smart. There's nothing in the books that says he has to like me. This isn't about Tony liking him. This is about his conduct, his behavior, his aggressiveness, his bullying. That's conduct. That's not, let's be best friends. That's conduct. Carlon said he reported the threat to Captain Arnaldo Sandoval at Station 81. Sandoval said he informed another captain who warned Tony he was walking a fine line, Carlon wrote. Sandoval had the two men leave their pass-down reports on the board to limit their interactions. Tony seemed to clash with more than just Carlon. Of course, he's a bully. He's going to clash with everybody, but Carlon was his target. Another firefighter told the supervisor that he felt Tony would be willing to turn off the hose as he fought a fire. Okay, let's just keep him in. This is a personality conflict, not a real problem. You've got to be kidding me. In January 2020, Carlon wrote, Sandoval said he had asked Tony, who was trying to get a pilot's license, about the Twin Tower. As the year came to an end, another captain at the station told the battalion chief about the conflict between the two firefighters and asked for advice on how to address it. The captains didn't want to be accused later of not separating the two men. This guy told the investigators, Halverson directed the captains to review the county's policy on equity with Tony and Carlon. This is not about equity. It's about conduct, violence, behavior, bullying. Halverson also told the two men that they were required to give each other pass-down reports in person, so now we're going to have more interactions. Carlon wrote that he told Halverson he felt there was a target on his back and that Tony might, quote, need, quote, support for his anger or whatever issues he's dealing with. Halverson, who has since retired, couldn't be reached for comment in the article. In December 2020, Tony stopped talking to many of the firefighters at the station because he's a big bully. Tony's reason why, Carlon wrote, is because he can't talk to anyone who supports a fraudulent employee who he believed to be Carlon. In Tony's view, that would be Carlon. The next spring, Heidi said Tony filed a complaint against Carlon with the county. Tony's mom helped proofread and edit. So Tony filed the complaint. Let's make sure we're clear on that. This happens all the time. Bullies play the victim. That is a very common tactic on the part of bullies. When they think the heat is on them, they back off and play the victim. They're the ones being targeted. And I'm begging investigators out there, if you're in HR or you're charged with doing an investigation, don't be so easily manipulated. Too many times, people who do these investigations, people who are in charge of these things, managers, they're manipulated by these people. This is not a complicated problem. It's so obvious, these bullies that play victim, that happens all the time. So just understand that that's what this guy is doing. Tony's mommy helped him proofread and edit the document in support of his complaint. Meanwhile, he's the bully. Over several pages, Tony denied threatening Carlon, accused the engineer of defaming his reputation, and included a laundry list of fellow firefighters' deficiencies. So he's basically saying Carlon's incompetent, I'm being defamed, and he's a big liar. Well, then let's do an investigation. Maybe he is a big liar. Let's do an investigation. Let's interview people. Let's find out who's telling the truth. By the way, I'm sure there's cameras all over the place at the fire department. You can't go check the cameras to see whether any of this stuff is true. Tony wrote, I am unsure of how I can improve the situation at this point, having already involved the station's captain without a positive outcome. Once the complaint was made, a supervisor told investigators the captains felt that they no longer had to worry about the issues because they were under the impression the county would be handling it. But of course it didn't, because that's how things go. Weeks before the shooting, Tony told a station mechanic that there was an ongoing investigation, but he couldn't speak about it until it was over, according to the investigative report. Tony said that the battalion chiefs had gotten involved and both he and Carlon had been interviewed. He said they both might get transferred out of the station. That never happened. Of course it didn't. Tony should have been placed on administrative leave while the investigation was pending, or both of them placed on administrative leave while the investigation was pending, but you don't keep them together. These are very serious allegations. A supervisor told investigators that Carlon had voiced concerns about Tony, including that his harasser would one day shoot and kill him. So Carlon knew that this guy was that unhinged. But the supervisor felt if these were credible threats, victim Carlon wouldn't be showing up to work and his wife wouldn't allow him to. So if you really thought he was going to kill you, why are you coming to work? Because he needs a job and he loves his job and he's hoping you're going to protect him as a fire department. The supervisor told investigators he spoke to Tony about whether he planned to hurt Carlon. And this is what he said. I'm not going to jeopardize my career over that piece of shit. That's what he said. On May 30th, they came to their house to a visit. As Carlon sat in the backyard with his father-in-law, he brought up to Tony and the work. This happens a lot. When you're being bullied at work, your whole family knows about it. You turn into a shell of yourself. It impacts everybody. You're telling your father-in-law about this jerk at work because that's what of a big deal this is. Carlon asked the father-in-law, I wonder if he owns a gun. He knew. He was experiencing something that he knew could lead to violence. 2 days later, On June 1st, a Tuesday, he had just finished an overtime shift at another fire station. Carlon arrived at fire station 81 and was relieved Tony about 7 a.m. After Tony left, the supervisor called and left a message on Tony's phone telling him he had left food in the fridge. About 9 a.m., after Carlon's wife dropped off their oldest daughter at school, she and Carlon spoke on the phone. He told her he'd try to talk to Tony at the shift change, but the engineer had ignored him. The couple then talked about their 17-year-old daughter's graduation from high school, just 2 days away, and their plans to throw the teenager a party. Heidi told him she had stomach ache and needed to lie down. Carlon said he'd call when he was done working on the fire truck. About an hour later, Tony returned to the station. He told the crew he was there to pick up his groceries. He put them in his white pickup truck and walked back towards the station. 2 men were working on a truck outside when they heard popping noises. One of them turned and spotted Tony's gun in hand standing over Carlon. They began walking toward Carlon, who was moaning in pain. At first, the firefighter thought that Carlon had been shot with blanks. Then that's when he heard Tony say, "Payback," and saw blood around his head. The employee took cover behind his work truck. Tony walked by him at a rapid pace with a crazed look in his eyes. Tony said to the man, "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you." This man knew exactly what he was doing. Tony was steps away from getting in his truck when another employee opened the screen door, the supervisor, and stepped out to the front porch, drawn outside by the noise. The 54-year-old captain raised his hands in the air and asked what was going on. Instead of leaving, Tony turned, aimed, and shot at Sandoval. Sandoval fell to the ground, tried to get to safety inside the fire station, afraid Tony would walk back and shoot him in the head. Instead, Tony took off, heading northbound on the highway. They found Carlon ended up passing away. Sandoval ended up surviving. Then they found out that Tony set his house on fire and then apparently died by suicide. According to the article, after Tony fled the station, he drove to his 3-bedroom home on Bent Spur Drive. At 11:15 a.m., he emailed his mother, "Goodbye, I'm sorry it has to be this way, but I can no longer take what is going on. I love you, it is not your fault." He then called the county fire department and reported that his house would soon be on fire. He said there was a hydrant at the base of his driveway. What can we learn from this situation? Well, we can learn to have a little bit of managerial courage. We can learn to take matters seriously. We can learn that when someone gives a violent threat, believe them. When he says fists will be flying, that's a violent threat. When he kicks down a door because he can't find a key, that's violence. These workplace bullies, these unhinged people, these aggressive people, they know exactly what they're doing, and they're preying on the fact that most people are nice and kind and don't expect that kind of behavior and conflict avoidance and all those things. And they're preying and manipulating people and just assuming that they're going to continue to get away with their behavior. And whether this guy Tony can help it or not, whether he had some sort of mental health disorder or whatever it was, doesn't matter. Because we need to focus on conduct. And what should have happened here is the first whiff of a complaint about this man's behavior. There should have been an objective, independent investigation. They should have been separated while the investigation was pending. A finding should have been made. Not it's a he said, she said, we don't know what's going on. They both said something and no. A finding. That's what we investigators do. We go in, we assess the situation, and we render a finding. This person's telling the truth. This person's lying. This is what's happening. That's the job of the investigator. And if you don't have an investigator that has the capability of doing that, you don't have the right investigator, because that is a special skill that we learn over time of doing investigations. And then once that finding is made, which would have been that Tony has, I'm sure, violated all your codes of conduct, he needs to be terminated. But this concept of transferring the problem Stop doing that. This concept of promoting the problem, which I see too often, stop doing that. This concept of ignoring the problem, stop doing that. Make these people accountable. And usually that looks like termination. And I think had they done that way in the beginning, right away, years earlier, Mr. Carlon would have been able to celebrate his daughter's graduation 2 days later. Now, every week on The Job Judge, I answer a question from a listener, and you can write to me at Karen@thejobjudge.net. I just might answer your question here on the podcast, or people write to me at TikTok, on my TikTok channel, which is at The Job Judge, or on Instagram and ask me questions. I love the Reddit site because I think I get so much good information from people that just write in about their questions regarding their jobs, et cetera. And this is from a Reddit site. This person wrote, "My job is insane." And then they say this: "I work as a secretary in a clinic. The HR is absolutely crazy and on a power trip. They usually are, but they just today are asking me to monitor the times that our employees are spending in the bathroom and keep a log of it. Example, Johnny Appleseed, 2:20 to 2:26, 6 minutes. Is it just me, or is that abnormal for a company? I'll be the judge of that. As a secretary, it is not your job to manage other people unless they are reporting to you. So no, that is not appropriate to expect you as the secretary to be monitoring when employees are going in and out of the bathroom. That's the job of the manager to manage breaks. So we should be giving our employees breaks. By the way, that's not required by law. You are not required by federal law to give your employees breaks or meal periods. I think that's a big misconception in the law. But of course, we want to give our employees a break unless we're in, open heart surgery for 4 straight hours and we can't leave. You want to give your employees a break, and you can set limits on that. You can say breaks can't be more than 15 minutes. Generally speaking, you can only take 2 breaks a day. Lunch is 30 minutes, whatever it is. You can set limits on that. And as a manager, it's your responsibility to be managing how the flow of work is going. It is not the secretary's job, and it's obviously making her very uncomfortable. It makes her feel like she's watching people and having to, that's not in the job description. So I don't know where this HR is. I'm a bit surprised that HR would be asking. I mean, I could see a rogue manager doing something like that, but for HR to be doing that tells me we probably need a little more training on human resources, or maybe you've got an HR person that really isn't a professional HR person, which I do see sometimes, where somebody maybe is the office manager turned HR, or even a secretary turned HR. And that's fine as long as that person then goes through some special training to become human resources. But human resources is a profession, and we need to make sure we have skilled people. So that situation is unacceptable. You should not be required to be checking off when employees are going to the bathroom. The manager's job is to manage breaks and workflow, not the secretaries, unless those people actually report to the secretary. Now, every week we drop an episode of The Job Judge. You're not going to want to miss an episode, so be sure to like, subscribe, follow along. I'm Karen Michael, and you've been listening to The Job Judge.